Hi, my name is Sammy Bradar, Associate Editor for the National Provisioner. We're here today speaking with Vice President Tim Goodnight and Chief Marketing Officer Pete Lewis of Spring Lake Ranch. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
All right, so just to start off today's conversation, can you discuss the connection between soil health and beef quality from your position as a producer?
Tim, why don't you tackle that one?
Yeah, you bet. We always hear that we are what we eat, right? And I think it's no different for the animals. And you think about the medium that the forages are grown in, that those animals are consuming, and it really begins with the soil health. We can have the best genetics, and we can plant the top species in degraded soils. But if we do have degraded soils, the nutrients, the vitamins that those animals need for health and production are not there. And so really, I first began thinking the most important aspect was the genetics of the animals we were using. And I shifted a little bit, and I thought it was really about the forages that they were consuming. And since then, and as I've learned more and more, I've really come to understand that it really is about the soils. And that's the baseline for really all of our production.
Okay, thank you. And how does that relate to your approach to grazing on the Sandhills of Nebraska?
Yeah, so we take our grazing seriously. As you can imagine, we implement what we refer to as adaptive grazing principles. And I would say the number one principle there is really our principle of disruption. If you think back on native herds of bison, grazing the plains, they would move in large mobs, and they would have long rest recovery periods. And so that's really what we try to mimic on our ranch and partner ranches. And so we have planned purposeful grazing disruptions. We look at historical grazing patterns on our ranches, and we continue to disrupt that ground at different periods to promote soil health, to promote species diversity of the forages that we're grazing at different times of the year to promote either cool or warm season grasses. So those are some of the things that we do.
Okay, thank you for that. And looking at your cattle raising practices specifically, can you discuss those in terms of regenerative practices and your organic practices? What do they entail from an operational perspective?
Yeah, when you think about our grazing practices, it's really comes down to the adaptive grazing principles. And that's what we look at. We take a holistic view when we're raising cattle. So it begins on the cow-calf operation. We want to work with our partners who are weaning those calves later in life, leaving them on with their mothers longer. There's a lot of work that's been done that shows that the rumen development and the ability of those animals to convert forages more efficiently that have been weaned later in life is important. So that's something that we stress early on. Then when we take them as yearlings, we're sending them to our yearling operations that we again enact these grazing plans with planned purposeful disruptions. From there, we're measuring our management decisions with soil testing. So we use Haney soil testing data as well as PLFA or phospholipid fatty acid soil health testing to give us a better idea of really the soil biology improvements that we're making. We'll look at soil respiration to see how active our microbial community is. We will look at the PLFA data to see how abundant the microbial community is in the soil. And we'll take all that data and we can continue to one monitor that data, but also enact management decisions to continue to enhance that, which ultimately, as I referred to earlier, is going to improve the forage quality and ultimately the health and the performance, eating quality and the health of the meat that we produce. Yeah. So those are the things we focus on the regenerative side.
Definitely.
I would build on that. We have to remember that we are an organic grass-fed operation and brand, and so are our partner ranchers. And so we rely solely on forages to feed and grow our animals, to ultimately create the quality and taste of our product. And so we're not managing irrigated lands, agricultural lands. We're really caretaking native pastures and using the animals as the tool to caretake the pastures, along with good practices and measurements and quantitative understanding of the impacts, how we do them. Spring Lake Ranch has 44 pastures. It's a 20,000 acre beautiful place. Actually, this is one of my favorite spots, as my background here. And so Tim utilizes the herd as his soil health improvement team. They really are. The cattle are an integral part of regenerative agriculture. They are actually, in my mind, the key is to have large hooved animals that graze and then fertilize and disturb the soil in the right manner. They're used as a tool, really, to improve the soil, that improves the forages, that ultimately older or more generations down the line of when we bring, of course, new animals onto the property get to eat. And so, I think that's critical. And that, the organic component means that when we're grazing, again, we cannot rely on fertilizers. We don't irrigate or improve our pastures from that perspective. The Sandhills, we're blessed being in the Sandhills, which is the world's largest intact grassland, has over 700 species of grasses in the Sandhills. And it really is probably one of the finest places in the world to graze cattle. It is the heart of cow-calf country for the beef industry in the United States, and rightfully so, because it's a terrific place to raise animals, both into that weaning and through the yearling component. And then sometimes they go off to, or most times they go off to the conventional feedlot, or in our case, we keep them on pasture and finish the animal in our own unique way, using, again, the abundance of the Sandhills, which is taken from good soil management that's been there. We're the third owners of the ranch since 1887. It was compiled from sort of pulling together original land grant homestead acts and homestead ranches. In fact, one of the, you can see sort of the remains of a foundation of one of those farms and an area in our ranch. And it really is caretaking an amazing place that, again, before there were cattle on it, there were millions of buffalo doing that just sort of by nature, if you will. And so really it is those aspects, and Tim has the sort of scientific part, but really it is the stewardship of the soil is done through grazing practices and smart grazing practices, because you do need to, as much as you can improve a pasture by grazing it smartly, you can hurt a pasture by grazing it less smartly, dumbly, I guess you would say.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, and really there are, it's not intuitive. I think it's something of a skill set to take the approach to use the animals as tools for soil health. And Tim talked about that journey he went on, from genetics of the animal to what the forage to actually, he really is a dirt farmer at the end of the day. He's creating great soil because that really makes the whole thing go.
Sure. Thank you for all those insights, Pete. And actually, we can stay over with you. So looking at marketing and branding, how are these sustainability practices incorporated into your branding and marketing messaging?
Yeah, it's really a critical component about what we talk about, how we raise cattle. Being organic and being 100% grass-fed is a commitment to how you raise the animal. And for us, it is ultimately how we're making what we believe is just simply really outstanding tasting beef, because we're using the biodiversity and richness of the Sandhills, and then our caretaking and improvement of that year over year to pasture graze and finish these animals who are marbling like you wouldn't find grass-fed in perhaps other areas in the world, and are developing a complexity of flavor because they're getting this really amazing nutrition throughout their lives in a very stress-free manner. And so all of that is intertwined. There isn't any one thing that is more special or different or other. Our outcome, what we want to do, is simply raise some of the world's best beef. And we're doing it in a manner that we believe in, which is organically, as well as grass-fed, and with a regenerative approach to managing the lands that our cattle are on.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And Tim, did you have any other insights that you wanted to add there?
No, I think Pete hit on all of those. I will say that it's rewarding when we do go to our what we would call our finishing facilities, and we've got some of these retail partners, because of course they are skeptical, and we bring them out to our finishing facilities and they're able to see, animals grazing, diverse pastures, and 20, 40 acre paddocks being rotationally grazed, the condition that they're in. I won't name the retail partner, but they've said, quote, these are some of the finest cattle we've seen, and they've been involved in grass-fed and grain-fed. So it's pretty rewarding.
That is great. Looking from your position in the industry, how are retail sales for organic beef faring compared with maybe a conventional grain-fed product or other organic meat options?
Yeah, grass-fed in general and organic grass-fed specifically has, over the last 10 years, far outgrown the conventional beef industry in both, volume, so pounds and dollars. And so it's a I would say a growth part of the beef, industry. And while overall a small component of total dollar sales, at about 2 to 3% of total beef sales, it is meaningful growth, because we're talking in the tens to hundreds of millions of dollars over time, and the penetration with consumers. And it really is because it aligns to what the millennial consumer, who's the dominant grocery shopper, really cares about. They're organic natives. They grew up with Starbucks and Panera and Chipotle, and the idea of eating better as an important value in their life. And now they're parents and they're teaching their children those values. And then you put the Gen Zs on top of that, where that's even more normal for them, and how they interact with food and interact with brands. And so right now, and I still see a very long runway, because comparatively speaking, organic in beef is underdeveloped versus organic in other proteins and other areas in the perimeter store. Organic in produce is double digits share of total dollars and volume. And I think the runway is long for organic beef to grow in the total beef world, because that's what the consumer wants, and they're voting with their dollars. And that growth, and particularly in the time of economic uncertainty throughout the pandemic, and then through this inflationary period, they continue to vote with their dollars and stay with organic and grass-fed, not downgrading. That to me is, everything's good when times are good, but when you have to make a choice and people make a choice, that really tells you the value of something. And the fact that organic grass-fed sales have continued to grow, both in volume and dollars, year over year throughout this most recent time period of our lives, just shows me that it is something that's consumers value, and more and more consumers are making that choice every day.
Sure. So you would say that it's a growth driver for beef and retail?
Yeah, absolutely. I've come up through sort of the consumer packaged goods world. I like data, and if you look at the Nielsen, or I forget what IRI is called now, it's a fancy new name. Circana. I don't know what that means. I think of the bug, circadias. I don't know why that pops in my head when that name comes up. But if you look at that data, it just clearly shows that, while small, if you think about the offset in volume gain in organic versus decline in volume in conventional because of the increase in price inflation, you know, it's a meaningful component. It's starting to become a meaningful offset to loss in volume. And you know, that volume on the rest of the stuff declines 1 or 2%. Well, that's a big number. But if organic, even though it's small, or grass-fed is growing at 10 or 12%, you know, that really is meaningful in terms of total volume of people consuming beef, you know, out there. So it's, you know, listen, we're realistic. We understand where we are, and with respect to what is an enormous food category. It's usually the number one, you know, the meat department's the number one department in dollar sales. Beef's the number one dollar sales in the meat department. So really, it's a critical component for retailers. To be healthy is to have healthy meat departments, both in dollars and volume and customer satisfaction. And so, you know, we see our role as making sure that shopper has the right choice that they want to have, and then when they want to vote for their dollars, it's there, and they have a good quality product, and that again is reflected in how organic is growing and its role within the total, you know, beef industry.
Definitely. Well said. Thank you. And so that's retail, looking at food service particularly. So can either of you maybe look at some opportunities for organic beef products in the food service category?
Yeah. So Tim, I'll take this one. What I would tell you is there's even more demand in the food service side than there is in grocery, and it's only partially met today. And one of the big impediments to growing in food service has always been that organic and grass-fed is a more difficult product to raise. You don't have the luxury of the feedlot creating the great equalizer. You could raise cattle in Florida and cattle in Hawaii and cattle in Nebraska. And if you take them to the feedlot, generally, you know, as long as they're the same breed, they're going to come out pretty same. And so it is the, as I like to say, the Budweiser of products, because we have a Budweiser brewery down the road for me, and that's going to taste the same as the beer that's brewed in St. Louis, and then I think they have one in California, probably tastes exactly the same. Whereas your only tools when you raise grass-fed is really the forages in front of the animals. And so that, along with the fact that it's more of a niche component of the industry, has led to variability in quality. And so much like a microbrew or wine, you can get fine wine if you're drinking Cabernet from Napa, but if you're drinking Cabernet from Minnesota, well, maybe not as good, you know, because it isn't the right place, the right soil. You have the right people growing the grapes, and then understanding how to blend them, etc. And so what we're finding is, by creating a system of production that emphasizes consistently excellent flavor, that's unlocking gigantic potential particularly for us in the food service world. And so the simply way to say it is, we have steakhouse quality steaks now that are organic and grass-fed, and before, maybe, but very little, and, you know, inconsistent. And so we see a huge runway in food service. And of course, there are uses for the other parts of the animal, and you see more of that. Particularly, you'll see on the burger side, there are chains that are, you know, doing grass-fed burgers. Hot Daddy, which is a microbrew and burger chain out of Texas, just announced they're moving everything to grass-fed burgers. So we see a waterfront of opportunity. College and university is another area. Certainly healthcare is another area. You know, a hospital cafeteria should probably be able to get organic meat, you know, whereas the place where people are making them, you know, most concerned about health and health choices, it's highest on their mind, which is a big driver of the adoption of organic for people. So yeah, to sum that question up, gigantic opportunity. There's probably a lot of unmet demand, and part of that is just having the right product. And we're finding that we believe we have the right product, and we know that our growth potential in food service is large.
Gotcha. So you guys are trying to capitalize on that growth potential?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, and you mentioned burgers, so funny kind of segue here, but what value-added products are popular with consumers of organic beef? And is there, I guess, any hole in the market that can kind of be filled with those value-added organic products?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think really there are organic analogs of pretty much every conventional product and value added, I've sold a lot of organic hot dogs, and of course, some pretty good companies there. We make an organic meatball that does very well. That's another value added category where organic seems to succeed well. I really think that if you can think of any category, marinated meats or fully cooked, there are certainly great organic options, comparatively speaking, out there. So the consumer has the same desire to eat things, and so they basically want the same products, but they want an organic version thereof.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And this is open to both of you, but this is actually my last question for you today. So if there is anything else about Spring Lake Ranch or your products that you'd like to share with the Provisioner audience, please feel free to do so. We'd love to get your insights. If you've got anything else you'd like to mention to our audience.
Sure. I think what I would say is to the trade audience is that, there's a shifting perception about what grass-fed is or can be.
Okay.
And I think, I would certainly say Spring Lake Ranch is at the forefront of that, but there are other people out there, who are innovating as well and thinking about how to make grass-fed better. And I would tell them that, they should reassess, they may have had an experience previously with grass-fed that wasn't optimal.
Mhm.
And then as it relates particularly to us, well, and certainly other people, there is a new wave of grass-fed coming, and that can go toe to toe with any grain-fed steak. And I will say this right now, I'll put our product up against anybody. You cut that product, I'll go toe to toe with anybody. I feel we beat them on flavor, and tenderness, and marbling. We marble out, we have white fat. So really there is a new school of grass-fed coming, and they should open their eyes to it, and think about, how they may participate in which I think is going to be an interesting growth wave for grass-fed over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. And Tim, do you have anything else that you'd like to say about Spring Lake Ranch or the products?
Yeah, I'd echo what Pete says. As quality as someone with a background in production is of the utmost importance to me. And I think a lot of folks have tried grass fed, maybe had a poor experience with it. I understand that. And I think if they're open-minded with how we're going about our production, how we're improving, we talked about it, soil and genetics. I think our product is fantastic now. And I think some of the decisions we're making, it's only going to get better in the future. So I echo what Pete says.
All right. Well, thank you so much for both of your time today. These were some great insights on the organic and grass-fed categories, so I really appreciate it. Again, I am Sammy Bradar, Associate Editor of the National Provisioner, speaking with Tim Goodnight and Pete Lewis of Spring Lake Ranch. Thank you so much again for both of your time.
Thanks, Deb. It was great talking to you.
Bye.